Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of a really great podcast. I know it's been a while, but I think this one's going to be worth it. I'd like to thank Sean, Stephen and Jeremy from North for letting me come to the studio and spending well over an hour with me, showing me around and talking me through some of their projects. What we do is we just dive in, if that's okay, Sean.
Yeah, sure.
And it's pretty much recording. So first of all, thanks a lot for letting me come to your studio. Being one of the studios I've always wanted to go and see. I've seen it on the Instagram and seen how beautiful it looks, and hopefully I'll get a little bit of a tour afterwards.
Yeah, of course.
Which will be great. But as I do with all the podcasts, Sean, it's really that journey of how you got into design. If we can step back and talk through that, what was the sort of the clicker or the spark that actually got you into design?
Well, I guess that you always want to make this as interesting as possible and different to everybody else's, but I guess that I was really, my dad worked for a Japanese company for over 30 years. And so he was like, I didn't know this was happening, but he was just bringing home the future. He disappeared to Japan in the 60s and 70s and then popped back with these futuristic products and objects and amazing packaging and things that I didn't realise how much that kind of permeated and subliminally kind of got into me. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, my mum was in fashion, so she used to disappear to Paris and bring back, she was, had a clothes shop, so she was bringing back the latest things. And I guess those two things, you can't help it, but those definitely influence you. My handwriting was awful, so I always had to print everything in caps. I still do. And I realised also I wanted to draw, and I could draw, but I never could draw as well as I wanted to. Yeah. So then I realised if somebody taught me how to trace, and then once I started tracing and cutting things out and sticking things down, I realised because of my failings that the things wasn't perfect enough. I ended up printing everything by hand and printing everything in caps and appropriating things to express what I wanted. So I ended up doing like little magazines at school. It was the only thing I was really good at. So I kind of ended up doing art, and then art led me to, I didn't even know what graphic design was, but I loved music. I mean, yeah. I'm old, and the bands were everything and anything you wanted to see and go and see and listen to. But album covers were really, I know, I'm sure loads of designers will always say that, but it was because it was our form of art and communication, album covers and music. And I was just, I used to paint my walls in my bedroom with album cover graphics. And, I went all over the country to see bands, particularly the Hypnosis covers, obviously, Steve Thorgerson. And, the Roger Deans were a bit too hippie for me, but I did enjoy the colour and then there'd be the posters. I used to work in a record shop part-time. And so I was just mad on album cover graphics. And obviously the bolder, the more powerful ones used to stand out and resonate with me. And then also the concerts as well, with the sort of the visual spectacle. That was also something that I absolutely loved. And, I don't go as much now, if at all.
I've got a lovely story about Storm. I was working at Bostock-upon It many years ago, before I even was doing visual. And I emailed Storm and I thought, I won't hear anything back. And he sent me a really nice email. And he was like, okay. Basically, I asked him if he'd like to come in. It'd be great if you could come in and talk. So he came in with the photographer. I forgot his name, and he went through album covers and the photos and everything like that. And I remember, I think it was maybe being an Audio Slave album covers, like a huge giant ball of metal and stuff like this. And they're like, oh, is that Photoshop? He just turned around and went, no, darling. In the industry I work in, it's a prop and set designers making it. And he's just telling you all about the covers. Nowadays you look and think, oh, right, you probably just did a Photoshop thing of the face on the thing that is the Pink Floyd tree. He's like, no, we actually got the guys to come and actually cut it and everything else. It's fascinating. But for me, that was almost a spark going, actually, there's such wealth of ideas and sharing and collaboration in the industry. But I just thought that was lovely. And that's kind of the thing that I'm doing now, obviously, with the podcast, meeting the people that inspire me and
Yeah, I used to work with one of the photographers who actually did photograph the pig above Battersea Power Station.
All right.
And shared a studio with him very briefly. But yeah, it was all done in real time, wasn't it? Yeah. I guess that after that I went to the Royal College. There was always polytechnics, and I did a couple of those. And that's very hands-on, and we had a brilliant tutor there, Peter Ray. This was at Leicester, and he kind of encouraged me he always brought in all these international designers into Leicester. I couldn't believe he'd getting them up there. Yeah. And that was just seeing, people like Pierre Bernard from Grappus and Gert Dunbar. They were all his mates, and he fetched them up, and I was just blown away by this European design, this modernism. I was completely, utterly hooked. I was doing information design, not graphic design, because I felt like information design is like a response to something, whereas graphic design is, if you've got something to say, it's a bit more decoration, embellishment. And for me, I just think it's about problem solving and fixing things and making things better, or making things great again, as you use in your mantra.
Yeah.
So I studied that and then went to the Royal College because of Peter's encouragement. And, there there's people like the Wynot Associates, the Thunder Jockeys, Phil Baines. There's some real, fantastic people and designers. And I love the competition, even though they were friends. I like that healthy challenge. And our professor was Gert Dunbar for 2 years that we were there, and then he left when we left. And he was a massive inspiration, and he was like, one of those other light bulb moments, because I had a friend who, at that time, who worked in total design. So I used to go and stay practically every other weekend in Amsterdam. And so I used to sit in the corridor outside of Wim Kraut in the Keizersgracht, his office, the total design office. And there'd be Ben Boss and Wim in there. And I'd be sitting there in the corridor looking at these amazing pinboards full of gorgeous invites to incredible exhibitions done by beautiful design. And at that time, Dutch design was, honestly, it was like the best.
Yeah.
So I just became completely, utterly fixated with Dutch design and European design, so Swiss and German, and the studios like Total and Studio Dunbar and Form 5 and Hardwerken, and there's just a whole gang of them. And I got more and more into it, just meeting the studio. So I started collecting the work. People were commissioning me to research books on graphic design about Dutch design. And for me, it was like kind of like a train spotter, just enjoying meeting the people, looking at the work, understanding their processes, and just collecting an archive, which was just fantastically inspiring. Even when I was at the Royal College, I took the whole studio over to Gert's studio. And I think that influence of Gert had a little sort of shop-like studio, which was small and intimate, and he had some great designers from Cranbrook in America, and there were lovely people, and went out, socialised, and kept in touch with Robert de Carter and some of the amazing designers who were around at that time. And then there was Total Design, which was a bigger organisation and much more organised. And I love the contrast between the two. So I suppose these things, you only look back and realise actually how formative, inspiring for my path. And it was wonderful after I started North. It was about a year into it, and we got invited by the Dutch to go over to to do this talk in Amsterdam. And it was a real privilege, and we'd only been, only going, and Simon and I went over. And there was Peter Saville on the list, Fuel, Designers Republic, Ian was there, Me Company, I think, at the time. Anyway, there was this, and they were called it Mind the Gap, and the Dutch were looking at us and saying, you're ahead of us. And I was thinking, well, I used to look at you guys, and it was that was kind of what a nice thing to say. And I think I was always measuring myself against, that's what I thought was good. Yeah. And you use it as a measure to say, look, I've got to get better than that. And I truly believed at the time they were doing some fantastic identities, manuals, really inspiring stuff. And Gert was completely crazy and just such a fantastic influence and, pushing you on. So that whole time it was a great honour to be sort of perceived as being like there was a gap pushing British design away from where they were. And I think there was like a modernist movement in the UK then, where we were kind of trying to, trailblaze something there.
Yeah, and it definitely was. The Me Company, Designers Republic, there was definitely like a new wave of British graphic design.
Mm.
Can I jump back to before you started North? It'd be nice to know why you started North.
Well, I think that it's leaving the Royal College, I was really interested in information design. Then I actually got into the RCA to do information design as well. Then they closed the course and forced me into doing graphics. But I knew I was interested in identity. So I went to the big agencies to learn how to do big projects. So I was really lucky enough to end up at Wolf Olins, and I used to sit next door to Wally on the top floor of Duke Street.
Oh, wow.
And again, so you really learn how to do big international projects. He was a fantastic, I travelled with him to Paris a couple of times with a project. We were doing Eurotunnel, and he did the whole presentation in French, and I was like absolutely in awe of the man. And he was the strategy side of what design could do, and I kind of respected that and learned from that. But I also then went to the smaller agencies because I also needed to do the cooler projects.
Mm-hmm.
And you realise that, I mean, we were doing some good stuff at Wolf Ollings, and it was a great time to be there. There were some good people, and it was a lovely community. But the smaller projects, like when I went to Cartilage Ravine, Simon had gone there ahead of me, and then I went to join him, and we just got the opportunity of really putting them on the map, I suppose, and doing some fantastic projects together, you know, where we were doing Comme des Garçons and we were working on the design museum.
Okay, so you would have worked on the issue, was it?
Yeah, we created issue. Yeah, because at that time they were actually being done by Wolf Ollings.
That's right, before number 3.
Yeah, and I daren't say this because it's on live, how I felt about it, but I remember moaning about it at a private view to the people who were at the design museum, and they sort of said, put your money where your mouth is. So we did, and that's how we got it, just from me banging on about it. And we did issue, we redesigned the whole exhibition space. This was down on Shad Thames, because obviously for the design museum, I felt like your graphics for the design museum has to be the best in the country. It has to be, and it wasn't, and it needed to be. So we ended up doing a few shows and designing some of the environments and the information graphics. Yes, we had some great fun doing the magazine. So working with Richard Burbridge, the photography, just finished from being an assistant. And so he was willing to do some fantastic experimental work together. It was really exciting. And yeah, we did some work I did the same sort of thing with Comme des Garçons and kind of moaned a bit about something, or used to turn up there all the time just to get hold of Six magazine. And so they asked us to design some windows for them. And then I think they paid us in suits. You know, you could just help yourself to a suit. Actually, that's one thing that's always stayed with me, that brand and that Reikar Kubu, and the whole has always been a massive influence as well, that sort of world. I remember meeting once with John Pawson. We went there one night and to an opening, so I got 2 of my heroes in one night.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's brilliant. That's really good. So then after Cartilage Ravine, is that when you set up North?
Yeah, I sort of did. It was a weird time after I left Cartilage. I was not sure. Pentagram kindly offered me something to go there, and there was some other bits and pieces. And I went to Imagination then in the end, because there was this sort of connection between all of the different disciplines, and nobody was really capturing that. Imagination was allowed to really think with the guys there about multidisciplinary experiential work. So I did the book Experience whilst I was there, but it was about going to Japan and places that I was going and realising there's this sort of thread. And I was putting it together with projects, and it was perfect fit with Imagination because they were multidisciplinary events, environments. And I've always believed that doing our profession means you never have to choose. You can do it all. You know, you can always be an illustrator, a photographer, but you can also be an architect, a fashion designer, product designer. You do all these disciplines because delivering on these projects, and if you do identity, the DNA of everything, you can use all these other channels to deliver it. And that's the secret, you know, you never have to choose. And Imagination, the scale of it was fantastic. And with the Imagination and with Wolf Ollings, I got to travel to work on projects all over the world. And that was just fantastic. And I learned the mechanisms of how you do that and what's important. So then I decided to start my own studio in 95. And so I started North. So it's 28 years this year.
Congratulations.
I've had the privilege of working with some fantastic designers here. You know, Mason, and there's just so many people, but in particular Simon, Mason, with Jeremy and Stephen. I worked with Stephen, who you met, Stephen Gilmore, for 25 years, so the whole time, and the same with Jeremy, it's about 23 years.
Wow. And have you always been in the studio? Is this?
No, I think this is 10 years now, or around 10. But we've always I started it next to the Design Museum down in Shad Thames, and then we moved up this way. We were in Bermondsey Street for a while, where the White Cube is, and then we moved up here, and we've been in this manor for a very long time.
I was going to say, favourite part of a project, is it the initial kickoff? Is it the presenting? Is it the final reveal? And I don't know about your studio, but I know a lot of studios, and perhaps over the last 30 years of doing it, sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. And I was just wondering if there was anything, tell the other people that sometimes the things aren't just right sometimes, unless you get it right all the time. I don't know.
No, I mean, it's impossible, isn't it? But I guess for me, the best bit is obviously the anticipation, the opportunity, the possibility. And I get excited about every single one. And so that's my favourite bit. And then also the research. I think that the learning about other people's professions and organisations and delving, because I think our business is about being like a forensic detective. You go hunting for things.
Yeah.
Because in that research, there's always the answers. That everything's always there. You just have to look in the right places. And so finding out about everybody else's sector and business is like, A, it's a privilege, but B, you feel like a student. And the worst bit is when a client says, I don't like it. And then you kind of argue, well, it doesn't really matter whether you like it or not, whether it works or not works. But luckily, very, very rarely does that ever happen. Yeah. But that would be my worst bit.
Is a lot of the work based on strategy, or is it based on an emotive response to it?
100% visual strategy, 100%. In your conversation, you've asked for what advice, and I guess the most important thing for me is process. 100% is the logic, magic. And if you go straight to magic, it's just guessing, and it's just not going to work because you've done none of the work, you've none of the research, you've not really thought about the visual strategy, the positioning. It's all about the why. You have to do that bit. And then you have the answers, you create the criteria, you kind of build a straw man and then you put the clothes on it. You can't just jump straight to what it looks like. And if you don't have a measure, so how do you know you've got there? It's not defensible for the client because they're just taking your word for it. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think when it's successful and you should explain the process, it can be entertaining, it can be insightful because it's intelligence. Yeah. And they suddenly realise that what you do is really sensible and intelligent and interesting. And as long as you can make it like that to them, then they trust you. And nowadays we get trust at the table. We get the seat at the table to help organisations. And it's because it's robust and the process is the measurable bit. You can see the why and why they trust you. Because if you're doing something that they kind of like and it's comfortable, it's probably rubbish. You want to go way beyond that. For something that's going to last and be really significant, you've got to build it up through that process. And we can't get there without that.
Yeah. I'd like to talk to you about, and I brought one along, the RAC guideline. I think for me that was kind of a pivotal moment when I was like, all right, who's North? This is really nice. And I also wrote down the photographers gallery work, the greats. They were great. They were really good. Then I just saw out there the co-op, which was excellent. And then it was the ACMI. I brought it along, a great bit of branding. And I suppose that was the thing that got me into guidelines. Because like yourself, you start your career and you're like, you don't know what you want to do. You do some big stuff, do some literature. But this thing here was the absolute turning point. And going back to your benchmarks for the designers, and that still today, I look at that and go, I'd love to create something that.
That's incredibly kind of you to say, David, and I'm really proud about that piece, that project. And I guess just jumping back a bit, I felt like what I learned along the way is I kind of knew that I always wanted the Total Design Studio and the Ottolika Studio were things that I always inspired me to think that's what a studio is, that's what our profession is. Mm-hmm. And the work that they were producing was at such a fantastic calibre. And I guess that with the RAC, it was one of the best moments of my life was when we won that project, and it was a real honour to have a go at it. And it was a 12-month project. We immersed ourselves into it. Time was having the right amount of time to spend on something to get it right. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's still going really strong today. I'm so proud that it's still, did this we were doing the design in 1996. We'd only been going a year. We won this project. And to be honest, there was a bit of, we didn't know what we were doing. And because of it, we did things maybe the long way around, but we did it the right way because it wasn't a well-trodden path. We ended up, and it was all built on the why again. The RAC was the first organisation to look after vehicles, cars. Yeah. And it was like they started in 1897. So it was like starting a business today to look after spaceships, and just gave them back their innovation and that kind of NASA. And they trusted us, and I think it really, the orange vehicles, we got them away from, we used to wear shirts and ties when they used to look after the engines, and so it was completely bonkers, and we got them into Gore-Tex and Polartec and, proper functional gear.
And was there any inspiration behind it? First year, win RAC, do the brand, got to do a guideline. Have you been naturally doing guidelines at Wolf-On?
Yeah, we were. I mean, we used to do volumes of the things.
Yeah.
I mean, we still do, but not necessarily now. But I think it's protecting the investment, making sure it's going to carry on being perfect. And so thinking about what they are, the vehicle for that protection. So we try and reinvent it each time because it has to be both inspiring and also makes life easy, gives you the rules and tools. But the RAC one was definitely influenced by all the design I was into of European giants. But it was definitely a labour of love. I can't believe you've got one because, as I said, each one was numbered and meant to be everybody who had one we had a register of who had it.
Oh, wow.
Based on the fact that we wanted to keep tabs on them. But I mean, it was amazing for a client to allow you just to use one way to Helvetica. Not even, you weren't allowed to use bold or italic.
Yeah, it's always been the thing. Why have two when you can have one?
Yeah, it's just what you do with it. I mean, just to create that, we did all the photography, and we realised, well, it was a secret, so you couldn't launch it to the market. So how the hell are you going to do the photography? Mm-hmm. So we took a van to Holland because we thought, nice excuse to go to Holland. Yeah. And we took a van and a motorbike to Holland, and we shot it. We had to take them in a covered wagon. And we shot all the images are shot in Holland, in Rotterdam, and we were sort of facing the wrong way on a motorway, so because we had to be on the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. And we would kind of had walkie-talkies to watch out for the police and find the quietest stretch. But it was great fun, and we had most of the studio on the trip because the van didn't have any equipment in it, and the vans were all at a funny angle because without the equipment, they built the suspension like that. So to get it level, we had to have everybody sitting in the back of the van. So all the photographs in there have got the whole studio crammed in the back of the van.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love the Netscape Navigator and how the internet has changed.
I still think that looks like quite a nice website, actually, just very, very simple. But in doing that, we ended up doing the sponsorship for the Formula One. So we got great fun going to Silverstone for a couple of years and doing air balloons and all sorts of exhibitions there. We started doing BSM, the driver training, and then we did a Goodwood Festival of Speed, which was also great fun.
Obviously, beautiful design guideline. It's static. And we're just speaking earlier in the pre-ramble sort of about motion, and it's great to see you embracing that and pushing that as well. Can you remember when the sort of motion part of North design direction to start embracing that from static, or has it always been there since sort of the imagination days as well?
Yeah, I think it's been for quite a long time. Yeah, definitely. Certainly since the 2000, because we were doing identities for TV companies, like when we did TeleWest, and we did another, that they all involved motion. Mm-hmm. So we always thought about a logo, about how does it move, how does it entertain, how does it, what does it do? So we did things like Cara. We were working with some of the youngsters then who are now have got their own companies, and they've moved into our territory, but then they were the motion graphic guys that we went to and got them to. We didn't do it ourselves; we got them to do it, but we would storyboard it. So I would say definitely for the past 23 years since we started. I actually noticed it was a bit like 3D logos. You see all these trends come and go. So motion was definitely one that was around and then it disappeared, as did the 3D logo, where that let's make everything look glass type and three-dimensional. Car badges. And then it went back to being, like Apple goes from 3D to being 2D. And logos kind of went in that trend. But I think timeless ones that have got to last, you've got to be able to do it and think about all of it. Everything's digital, everything moves. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about that as a quality, as a characteristic on any identity now. But I still, like with the book that we've just done, I still love the fact that you've got the distillation, the simplification down to its, as an identifier, down to its simplest form. How does it work without any movement, any digital? What does it look like? Yeah, totally. And that's still, it's got to perform at that level to last.
And do you have motion capabilities in-house? Or
We've got some fantastic designers here. A lot of them have the skill and the knowledge.
Fantastic. As with all these conversations, I'd love to meander around and everything. And the motivation as a young creative wanting to make marks and stuff through to when you own a studio, that motivation, what gets you up to go, right? We're in the studio, we're doing this opportunities come in. Is it the opportunities, or is it the fact that this is something you absolutely love? Pure passion.
It's got to be a hobby as well as your job. And you have to wake up every day and think, this project I'm working is going to be the best thing we've ever done. And you've got to have that kind of anticipation and approach to it, and it is true because you want to, and you're always aware of what the world is, in the design world, and you just want to be the best. You want to go one stage further with everything, and it just becomes your way of life, isn't it? I mean, there is no, it's not like a 9 to 5 at all. But I actually think for me, it's a pleasure. Obviously there's bad bits. I hate doing the paperwork. Sometimes you have tricky clients, but on the whole, it's what a job, what a profession.
Lucky, aren't we, really? I think Regine said that as well, that we're just so lucky that what we do, get to create every day.
Yeah, I loved her answer. She nicked my answer, because I would love to have said what she said, which was the best bit of a project is, just coming up with the ideas. She loves credible creative. And then the worst bit is coming up with the ideas. And I thought, that's definitely resonated with me.
And back to more the business side, I presume now you've got a name, your studio and the collective behind superb work ever since 95. Does it just come to you, or do you need to go out and meet people, or is it very much, I don't suppose phones ring anymore because everything's on an email, but starting up or people getting into it? Any advice on how do you get your first client? How do you maintain that? Do you go out and be seen? I think what you were saying about Design Museum and putting your neck on the line by saying this isn't great, and then someone responding to it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that we're really lucky, and that we do get people who come to us. And I think that's because of this sort of northern approach to things, which is worry about what you've got, not what you haven't got. And you look after the clients who trusted you and gave you the responsibility, and you do your best for them because they've come to they've given you that trust, and they will recommend you to other people. And it's those relationships that build your career. And we never go looking, ever. I'd love to do an airline, but I've never cold called, and I would never go after anything. That has always worked. And also keeping our head down. We don't enter competitions. We would never, ever pitch for free, ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been one thing we've never done for 28 years. But we would only, if you paid pitch, we would do that. But we wouldn't, because it doesn't work. It's like Beauty Parade. I don't go eat at five-star restaurants and decide which one I'm going to pay for.
Exactly. As a studio, we're very much that, and I think it's great to be able to be like that. I'd like to talk about the new book. I think it's one of those things, it's almost like it's got to be in the making. There's only so much sort of archive of your work I can have on my shelves and everything else. So it's nice that you've actually created that. Was that your initiative, or was that Unit's idea?
Well, we've been trying to do a book for years, partly because we wanted the studio to celebrate some of their projects and the work and put it all down. But we tried lots of different ideas and platforms, and we started and then we stalled. Just wasn't good enough, or we changed our mind, and also finding the time. And then we got this idea as it became a North project rather than, certainly isn't a monograph.
Yeah.
Because I feel like monographs are at the end of your career. And so this book's all about the present and the future, not about the past. In a way, we're looking back and it's full of the past, but in a way on a journey to something else. And it's a project rather than what's the point of printing out a website? Not that we've got a
that's going to be the next question.
But what's the point in just reprinting what you can find digitally online? And, what's that? There's no point. So we really didn't want to do that. And we really didn't want to do a monograph where we wrote about how we get all these stories. So we just basically created a beautiful narrative of the the privileges we've had of journey throughout the globe, working on fantastic projects. So we start in Finland and end up in Australia and all the way. So it's actually became a lovely narrative, and it sort of slightly designs itself, because you get one project in Hamburg, which might next, the latitude as you travel through the earth puts another project next to it.
Great.
And so it's sort of a real labour of love.
I can't wait to see it. Well, open it. I'm not going to open it until at least get back to the studio or back at home. I was going to ask about the website. You got something, you have a presence, but you're not kind of bringing depth work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. For years and years, we didn't have one. We just didn't have a site for many years. And we've always kept it really simple, because you can't tell everything. And we wanted to keep it ambiguous, because just because we do a lot of cultural brands doesn't mean we couldn't do railways and airlines. And so as soon as you put anything up there, you put yourself into categories, unless you put an absolute massive volume of everything. And I don't know, we just felt like it was unnecessary. We are turning our attention to it now, just again, really for the studio, because the studio is proud of its output and the designers are proud of what they've done. Yeah. And so we need a vehicle to show that for them, and also for recruitment going forward. So we realised that we've got to be a bit better at it. We've never missed it for 28 years, but we might do a better job of it very soon. So we're thinking about it. But it won't be about, this book is about for you. This is for you, somebody who understands and has passion about our industry and, appreciates and understands where it's all from. It's not for new business, and it's not for clients, and it doesn't do any of that.
Yeah.
It's not a history book, but the website will be for just saying these are some of the projects that we've done, and, we'll focus on that one next, but it takes a while. Yeah. These things always take a while.
It does. And I suppose going back to some of the questions, advice, anything that you've held on to that you pass on to other juniors, seniors, that you actually think, I heard this once, or I believe in this?
Well, I think we touched on it before. I mean, definitely the process. You've got to learn the process. And actually, when you get stuck, it's the thing that you can rely on will get you out of anything. If you stick to the process, you always find a solution, always. And I promise the solution is always in the research, doing the work and looking. And sometimes, and the best times, is not sitting in front of your computer and, moving away from that posture. That's what I pass on to students when I get the opportunity. And if you teach them the process, they know how to problem solve then. I also think there's two other things that I think are, superpowers. One is definitely to be fiercely competitive, because it is, you...
Within yourself?
Within yourself. I mean, we were talking about visual, and we were talking about being able to see what good looks like. And for me, it's always been about measuring ourselves about, well, what's going on in the world, not just, what's going on in architecture. Let's look at inspiration. It's about looking for who's doing brilliant work around the world, and then you just have to get better. Because it's like if you're playing sport against somebody and you can beat them, you're never going to get any better. But if you play against people who are better than you learn. It's like working with Wally, you learn from these people. And 100% never ever stop at your first idea. And if you do, it's going to fail. It's just not good enough.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big part of our industry, unfortunately, is that I think a lot of people stop at that first idea, mainly because of timesheets and stuff like that. And I think time is so valuable to us, but it is the thing we try to get most of out of any project, to get as much time as possible to live with things, to get things right. And, we kind of fight for that at the beginning of a project. And so I think just for any young designers, just don't be happy with just the first thing.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And do you get your work up on the wall?
Yeah. Very much so. I see a lot of websites with people pointing at walls and people stuck at, but we do. And genuinely, because we're a team, all the designers have a kind of a cooperative say in things. Yeah. We put them on the wall, and everybody's sort of tasked to do on big projects, to do certain aspects of it, and everybody puts everything up, and then we discuss it and talk about it. We leave it sitting up there for a few days, because if it just sits in your computer, you can never see it. If it sits in a PDF or on your desktop, so printing things out is absolutely vital, especially when you're doing identity. Because also you start to see cross ideas between things, and it's those discussions that, and actually this dovetails nicely into working with Peter, because, and I'll go and see if Jeremy's, but we were in that process where we were sticking everything on the wall for doing the factory with him. Yeah. Because his studio's just next down the road between us, and he'd come in, have his coffee. It was in the afternoon, late afternoon, he's at his best. And he was sitting over there, and he was laying on the table, actually, and we had all the work pinned all the way around. And he just said, the problem is, we've seen it all before, everything's been done. You can't look at anything but realise you've read something, or, you've seen it somewhere, and even it's mainly subliminal, you're not copying against the law. But he was right, and he said, the only thing that's never been done is the mistakes. When the unintentional, the glitches. So that identity was built around creating mistakes and glitches. And it was quite a nice, for me, that was like, wow, another profound moment from him. He is a god, and he's got this sort of incredible memory banks of things and people, art, references in a great way. So he brings all that to bear in any kind of creative conversation. And when we're doing crits and things, and so it was like an utter privilege and a fantastic education working with him for the past 6 years. But I'll go and get Jeremy if that's...
Thank you. We were just talking about from beautiful print through to how motion comes into play with identities, and you guys have been doing it all the time, but now it's, you could say it's maybe more prevalent across some of the work, because it was the last project I featured on Visual was the Peter project, which sounds like it was quite a long process, 6 years, and to get your insight into that as well, and how it came about, and the results, and little stories along the way.
Can I start off, because I know how it started? in a pub.
I did it.
Started in a pub on a Christmas drinks and with Peter, and he asked us if we would help with the MIF, the Manchester International Festival. And, Jeremy and Stephen were there, and we said, yeah, of course, anything to help the North. And then I'll pass over.
Yeah, I think he'd seen some of the card work, and we were discussing that with him, and he was obviously been involved with MIF since the beginning.
Yeah.
He knew that they were coming up to the then called The Factory. It was due to be opening, and he knew it was a good time to start the conversation about what the visual identity might be. And that was, I think, at the time, probably 3 or 4 years before it was actually opening. But he was keen to get us involved in the festival.
Mm-hmm.
So we fully understood the organisation, which was going to end up moving into this new space, which I think was quite insightful because they're quite a complex organisation, going from a biannual festival into a building which is going to be open 24/7 for the whole year. So there's quite interesting targets there, 850,000 tickets a year based on coming from a festival, buying a festival to that kind of offer for a customer. Quite a challenge. But he did say to us, didn't he, said, you should say no.
He thought, yeah.
He offered you an escape because he knew how complex it was. But I think as soon as we started having debates and discussion and brainstorms with him, both in his studio and our studio, I think that's where the friendship formed really, and it was very much a deep collaboration. And then obviously pandemic hit, and we were in numerous conversations about how the festival brand should evolve, and then what kind of tonality the visual identity should be for Factory. I'm personally very pleased that he invited us to be part of that project, having grown up with Factory Records and his work, and also being aware of the work that MIF does in the community, bringing amazing work, creating amazing work. And I think that learning process from the types of productions they're putting on helped us really understand what the atmosphere of this building is going to be. And now it's open, it's now up to them to deliver it. And obviously visual identity is there to support and explain and tell people what's happening when. And the first event, Free Mind, was, I think, a great articulation of how this building can be, really flexible for artists and creators.
Yeah.
But I know he's had a very personal relationship with this project for a long time because of going to Hacienda and loving the new order, and Joy Division and the whole music scene. And I knew that he was passionate about that, and obviously, an admirer of Peter's. So it was lovely to see them kind of, that relationship.
Yeah.
And it's been brilliant because we've ended up doing everything. The website, the wayfinding. Obviously, the names changed several times. That's been quite problematic and interesting. And then he ended up doing this record sleeve with Peter, which obviously must have been, well, it was one of your career highlights.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is obviously, for me, it was a full circle. So Factory Records informed, Joy Division and, etc., and then created the Hacienda, and then I think in part created MIF. And now this building called Factory, Peter said, oh, finally, Factory Records have got an office. But for one of the first productions to be a piece of vinyl, I think it was a beautiful circular story.
Yeah.
I've never designed a record cover vinyl as it was, but now we've done 1,500 because each of them has a unique digitally printed cover. So they're all numbered 1 to 1,500, which again is quite an interesting analogy within the Factory Records numbering system, which Peter recognised.
And how does one get one of these records? Are they just like a promo?
Yeah, you can buy them through the MIF, through the Factory International website.
And what's on that?
It's an artist collaboration with Neville Gabby and Nabir Iqbal, the musician, and was commissioned to create a piece for one of the first productions of Factory International. And his idea was, he realised that actually the factory is being made by other factories locally and in and around Manchester. So there's a concrete factory, a cloth factory is making all the curtains, there's a wood factory that makes and so Neville went around all of these other factories and did recordings and interviewed people and recorded the sounds and the noises, and then himself and Nabir put together this, I think, 10-track record, which is really, really, really nice piece of, it's just a great encapsulation and inclusion of the people that, once the building's open, people come coming through the doors, these people who built the factory, it's just a really lovely, beautiful way of recognising their craftsmanship. And having been going up there on site over a period of years and seeing all these people, who, you know, day to day, I mean, it's like a little mini world for them.
I mean, Jeremy took 2,000 images, him and John here, where it kept going up whilst it was being built.
Wow.
And documented all the different fabrications. And they were the images they put into the algorithm that created the randomness of the images together and on the covers. That photography, it put as well the visual, what's the word, forensic again, you know, looking at the building and how it's made. And we got very close with Ellen, the architect from OMA. It was great fun, wasn't it, as a project?
Yeah, it was amazing fun. I mean, you know, obviously getting to know Peter really well through the process was a you know, an honour, but also getting to know, like Sean said, getting to know Ellen, the lead architect from OMA. We'd become really good friends, and she used to go to Hacienda. So it was like a triangle of understanding about the Hacienda and the importance of factory records becoming Factory International, and now this new amazing building. But it's about just the right amount of referential information from the past. Yeah, there's learning from the past, building on the heritage, but not being overtly over the top about it. And obviously then Ellen then got the interior designer involved, Ben Kelly, who obviously designed the Hacienda. So it became a square, you know, a triangle to a square. And there's this, and I had a meeting with Ben right at the beginning of the process, and he said, well, how much of Hacienda or the factory record should this be about? And I said, just enough. Because it just needed to be just enough. It's not a museum. This is about creating the new, which factory always was. Yeah.
One of the things I really love about it retrospectively is that it wasn't an intention. It wasn't what we were aiming to do, but the identity is a kind of a modern version of the original factory record logo, because the factory used to look like that with chimneys and smoke. But the factory of the future is the glitch. Logo is of lots of different shapes and it's flexible, the space. And
I was going to say, did you write that algorithm inside, or did you partner with someone to do that? Because you mentioned the core.
No, that was done.
That was done by stuff. That's lovely.
Tongi.
Yeah, for the record, that was for the record, and the randomisation and selection of the images was all done here in the studio with Tongi did the code to do that. And Peter from Rotator, who did the printing and production of the vinyl and the packaging, he said that's never been done before, and he couldn't believe it that this was possible. And it got printed in Kent right at the last minute, and I think he did an amazing job, Peter. I mean, Rotator's based in Ireland, but it was printed in the UK and then delivered. And what was nice about that project is that they had an event at the Factory International in the building for everyone who built the factory. And then they gave one of these record and vinyl.
Well, 1,000 disappeared overnight. So there's only 500 in existence really now. And then we've got a few of them that we bought.
Yeah.
We got given a couple, but we bought the rest because we loved, just a lovely thing, and to do record covers again. How nice is that?
I mean, quite rare nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's like full circle to our conversation about where you started and what was your inspiration, and it was record covers.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you for spending well over an hour, and it's a privilege to finally meet you and actually be in the studio. When I walked in, just seeing the file copies on the shelves, I was like, yeah, it can't beat a bit of tactileness and stuff. So I'd just like to say thank you for agreeing to it.
It's been a pleasure. In fact, really nice to have a conversation.
Yeah, and thank you for the book as well. That's an extra bonus as well.
Jeremy can find a record cover for you as a record copy on the way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's proof I have about 50 over there. So
brilliant.
I'll give you one.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, honestly. Brilliant.
Pleasure.